Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Shalom, everybody. This is Natalie Sapinski, and you're listening to Returning Home. Some of you heard our program last week, and we had a guest, Moshe Dejman, from Baltimore, who has recently made Aliyah with his family to Beit Shemesh, and he is originally from Venezuela. He moved to America in the year 2000 as a teenager with his family, and just recently, 20 years later, made Aliyah to Israel. And he has been on a few times, and each time he pretty much tells us the same thing, how he has seen this movie before. And it's frightening to hear that, but it's a wake-up call, and people really need to open their eyes, and I'm thinking of some way to get people to listen without creating panic. I think one of the things that holds people back, besides their job security or finding a house or leaving their family, is the fear of the unknown. And this happens, and this is going to happen, making a change into uncharted territory for some of us, people who have never been to Israel, people who have never moved. It is frightening. It could be frightening. But if you believe in God and you trust in Him, you shouldn't be afraid. I've been taking these walks in the morning. We got a dog at the beginning of Sukkot, and I've been taking these walks with him in the morning all around Susia, beyond the security road. And sometimes you don't see where that path is going. You see a big hill coming up, but you don't see beyond just a few steps in front of you. And I used to kind of get scared, like, oh, I don't know where I'm going. I've never been this way. Is it going to be okay? But I just keep walking, one step in front of the other. And the path does lead me to another place, okay? And it eventually leads me all around Susia and to a place I know so I can find my way home. And you have to have that same kind of faith that you will land on your feet, because you will, I'm not the first person to live in Israel from America. You're not going to be the first person to live in Israel from America. There are lots of us here. We've all made it. We've all had struggles, and we've come out on top, meaning we're still here. We're productive. We have families, and our families have stayed. And this is the place we're supposed to be. And, you're not going to have all the answers, and you don't need to have these grand plans. This is where you're supposed to be. And if you just, have some faith, you will start packing up and getting over here. We'll be right back.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Between the president and the prime minister.
Long, bitter struggle. You think you can get real news about Israel from major news sources located far away from Israel? Think again. Get it from the source. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Welcome to Returning Home. This is your host, Natalie Sapinski, and we're speaking today to Yoseph Prigal, who I believe is an oleh, but not so new. Originally from Baltimore. I got in touch with him through his mother, who was listening to the show. As you know, people listen to us from all over. So this is very exciting. Yosef came to Israel, I believe, as a lone soldier many years ago. Yosef, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and about your Aliyah?
Sure. So I came to Israel originally as a bit of a fluke. I was finishing up high school, and as most people, get ready for college and come to Israel for a year. I was debating between that, and I was actually heavily leaning towards going to college and stuff. And in the end, I kind of came to Israel, and when I came here, I really fell in love. So I came here originally not expecting to make Aliyah, But really just to come and figure myself out. I was young. I was 17, and I was in a program up north in the Golan Heights. The program itself was nothing special, but one of the benefits that it gave me is I was really in touch with Israelis, with the simple, Israelis that live the day-to-day life, and that really had a profound effect on me. And throughout that year, I basically ended up deciding to make Aliyah.
Okay. Fill in some details here. What year are we talking? What year was this?
That year would have been 2013-14, year right before, I don't know what it's called in English anymore, Tzuk. Yeah, that summer after that year was the summer of Tzuk and Shuvu Achim. So that had an effect on me also that summer, and that kind of confirmed that I really wanted to make Aliyah. From there, I basically decided that if I was going to make Aliyah, obviously that entailed going to the army, and I really had to integrate, learn Hebrew, do all that. And I moved to when I came back to Israel after the summer, I went to a different program called Atzmona, which is a mechina for preparing people for the army. It's a religious mechina. It's down south by the border of Gaza and Egypt.
Okay, slow down. I want to explain to our audience what a mechina is and what your program was, because you kind of gloss over it as if everybody knows. Now, you said something I have to disagree. You said you were in a program and it wasn't so special. I think every program in Israel is special, okay? I went to the one-year program.
I'll give you that point.
Every program here is special, and the fact that you came back and you're still here makes it all the more special. Every interaction you have in Israel could be, holy and special. So good. Thank you for that point. The second point I want to just expound upon a little bit is mechina. You said it perfectly. It's a pre-military program. Throughout Israel, they have these programs. My son is in one right now. They can go, I think, from 6 months to even a year and 6 months. And what they do is they prepare our boys and girls for the army. And you may say, what do you mean prepare for the army? Don't they all go in when they're 18?
So most people do go in at 18. Some people delay that either to go to mechina programs or for, any other reason, whether it's to finish doing. For example, if a person wants to get into the pilot's course, or if he wants to get into a special unit in intelligence, maybe he has to do some special testing. So maybe they'll delay their draft in order to finish up those testing things and get the results back. Some people delay a little bit to work or to travel a bit. But for the most part, most Israelis will go into the army around 18, 19.
Okay, right when they're done high school.
Right.
Okay, so you did not. You went to this program, this pre-military preparation program.
Right. I was there for about a year and 4 months, and it was really mashmuti for me. It was really meaningful to me because it was really the program really allowed me to integrate with Israelis. I made a lot of really good friends that to this day I'm in touch with. That really changed the way that I was able to integrate into the army, and the way that I was able to integrate into Israeli society. So that was a really big bonus for me for doing that program. Mm-hmm. Going back to what I mentioned before about Tzuk and Shuvu Achim.
Yeah, slow down. Let's translate that, because I think you're talking about the time the 3 boys were kidnapped. Is that right?
Yeah. So that would be the 3 boys kidnapped is called Shuvu Achim, right? Return our brothers. And then the operation that came after that, that when we went into Gaza was called Tzuk or Protective Edge, maybe, I think.
Okay.
Something like that.
Sounds right. Okay. Go ahead.
So it happened to be that the mechina that I was in, the program that I was in, I actually ended up in the same class with a brother of one of those 3 boys. And I became pretty good friends with him. So that was also a very, very meaningful, aspect. You really meet people that have been firsthand experience. And obviously a lot of people in Israel, unfortunately, have that in their background, but it's kind of a foreign concept for people coming from abroad, what that means. And it was very eye-opening for me. I spent a Shabbat by them at one point in time, and it was really amazing to see how families can take that and do things to strengthen Am Yisrael. That family just happened to be, really above and beyond. I'm sure everyone has their strong points with this family. I don't know. It just struck me personally. Very, very happy family, and was able to just take all that pain and sorrow and just turn it into something amazing, where they really made big waves in in Israel afterwards. The
Okay, let
Yifrach
me
family.
jump in just so the audience understands. When you're talking about Israelis, this happens to a lot of them. What he's talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is terror. There are lots of victims of terror here, and it's even as a new immigrant. Yosef is a new immigrant from America. I'm a new immigrant, but even I have known people who have been killed, have been related to people who have been killed. I have been to funerals, even me, and who the hell am I? I'm just some American living here, but it's true. It affects so many people. There's just so many terror attacks here. It's it's very normal for all of us to know someone that it has happened to. It surprised
So
me.
I wanna cut in for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, do.
I think that the word terror tends to scare Americans, and as much as it is, it's a scary thing. But we also have to put it in context that as much terror happens in Israel, realistically, with all the numbers counted, it's still probably safer in Israel than living in Brooklyn. Like the amount of crime that you have in Brooklyn versus the amount of terror here, just the word terror happens to be, very aggressive. So, as much as it is dangerous, it is, you have to keep your eye out, you have to be aware, but it also depends where you are. It's not like if you're living in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv, you don't have to, you're not constantly, running away from terrorists.
Not at
We do
all.
have normal, so just because I feel like sometimes Americans get this impression, or whoever's listening, that Israel's this war zone, and it's not. There are a couple places you have to be careful, and it is something that's known that there are people that went through terrorist attacks and things like that. But it's kind of like in America knowing someone that got mugged, or knowing a family that maybe had someone unfortunately get murdered or something like that. Like, it's known, but it's not. Life does go on. There is
No,
normal
that's
life here.
right. I did not mean to insinuate that it's scary here but it is not scary here. Okay, I live in Susia. It is not scary here. I walk the dog every morning with no gun. Okay, no gun, no phone. It's not scary. Just like any place, there are dangers. There are dangers at the Concord Mall where I grew up. There are dangers at the gas stations on 95. Okay, there are dangers everywhere in the world. It's a dangerous world. Israel's safe. My kids walk around alone from the age of 3. They could go on their own, no shoes. You here, if a kid's lost, people all look for him. Yeah, it's very, very safe here. It's like old-fashioned 1950s America safe here. What I meant to say was the country is so small and we're all family. So when something does happen, you do tend to sometimes know these people, even if you're new, even if you're a newcomer. That was my point. But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on, Yosef.
Sure. So going back to what I was talking about being in a mechina, so that was really just really, really helpful, really good integration. And from there, I drafted to the army. I drafted to a place called Mikve Alon, which is a base in the northern part of Israel, probably in the lower Galil, I want to say. And essentially, what that place is it's a 3 to 4 month course for new immigrants to learn Hebrew in the army. So it's essentially an army ulpan. And what you do is you do a very, very basic level of basic training, and then you have a 3-month course. And then when you graduate the course, everyone kind of goes their own way to wherever they're going. So after I finished that course, I went to Givati, which is one of the infantry brigades. That's the one with the purple berets. And I did my service there for 2 years and 4 months.
Wonderful.
So what that entails is essentially after I finished that, 3-month Hebrew course, I went into 8 months of, I guess we would call basic training, or 4 months of basic and 4 months of advanced training, after which we were, so to speak, deployed. The way the army works in Israel is you have times of deployment and then times of extra training. So we immediately went into this period of extra training. And then from there, that was a couple months. And then from there, we were deployed to the Lebanon border, where I was stationed for about, I want to say, 6 months. From there, we did another, let's say, 4 months of training. And then we were deployed to the West Bank, to Shechem or Nablus, where we were for another, I want to say, 4 to 6 months.
All right, slow down, because you're gonna lose some people because you're mentioning places and I asked Yosef to come on this show because someone had asked me, a few people so far, could I interview some lone soldiers? So stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to continue in our next segment with Yosef and his experience. If you have any questions, please write to me, Natalie, at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, or the chat right there on your screen at www.IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. We'll be right back.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Welcome back to Returning Home. This is Natalie Sapinski, and we are continuing our conversation with former lone soldier Yoseph Prigal, who is telling us now all about his infantry experience, and we're continuing now. I want to ask you this. You know, you're this American boy, you moved here, you learned Hebrew in 3 months, and then they give you a rifle and they send you out there. Was that exactly how it happened? I mean, did you feel like a foreigner?
No. So first of all, I wanna go back. The reason I put such a emphasis on the Mechina that I was in is because really from that point is really where I learned a lot of my Hebrew. So I wasn't going into the army knowing nothing, which unfortunately sometimes does happen, and it becomes very, very difficult. The Hebrew course that I did, you know, as amazing as a Hebrew course can be, 3 months, you're not going to learn a language. You know, so for me, for example, I went in with, you know, speakable Hebrew, and the Hebrew course basically helped me to, how do I say, it helped me to like clarify my Hebrew, things like, you know, if I wanted to say, you know, pass me a cup of water. So when I first went in, I might say something like pass water, and I wouldn't really know how to put it in the proper tense or, you know, the proper, you know, future, past, etc. And that course kind of helped me to, you know, make my sentences sound a little more sentence-like. But I went into the army, you know, being at least semi-fluent. So, and obviously, you know, there's always, every lone soldier has situations where they don't understand their commander or their commander doesn't understand them. And it's really, it is a part of being a lone soldier, and it's a struggle. You know, really, I always tell people the most important thing about coming to Israel is just learning Hebrew. From a religious perspective, it'll help you, you know, in your learning. From a non-religious perspective, it'll help you integrate, it'll help you live life, it'll help you understand people and make friends. It's just overall a really, really important thing. It's probably the most important thing that anyone thinking about making Aliyah could focus on.
Okay, really now you're talking to people. Some of them are, you know, 60 years old and older, and they have no intention of mastering a new language. And you are presenting them right now with a huge reason not to come. And I've got to argue with you because I have seen people come here and they make friends and they stick in their circle and they basically know very little Hebrew. I mean, maybe shalom and lihitot, and they are fine here. Now, if you're young,
I'm not saying that it's impossible.
I'm not telling you it's impossible either. I'm telling you you're stressing one point, and I want our audience to listen. That's your point of view, Yosef, and it's a good point. And for everyone who can pick up a new language and is young, Kol hakavod lechem, come and learn a new language. I did it. My children did it. My husband struggles. Beseder? Not everyone can learn
Right.
a language, and not everyone has the confidence. We all have different talent. It is fine to
Sure.
come here. Everyone has a skill and everyone has a talent. And if you come here and you have friends and you speak English to them, kol hakavod lechem, come and speak English to them. As long as you get here. I want you
That is
people to
true.
just get here.
Most Israelis know at least some level of Hebrew, some level of English, and they're very happy to practice their English. Obviously, if you can't learn Hebrew, you'll make it work. There's always someone to help you. It's one of the beautiful things in Israel is that really people are always happy to help. And even if they can't understand you, I'll tell you a beautiful story just to reconfirm that. Right, when I was in my mechina, when I was in the program that I was doing. So it was a religious mechina. So, it was more like think of a yeshiva setting, just, switch the word mechina for yeshiva. And anyway, one day this boy comes up to me and he goes, let's do a chavruta. And I looked at him, and obviously he said that to me in Hebrew. And I looked at him and was like, you don't speak any English and I can barely introduce myself in Hebrew. How are we going to do a chavruta? And he said, don't worry, we'll work it out.
Okay, slow down, Yosef, because people don't know what a chavruta is. A chavruta is a pairing, as partners, learning as partners, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So we sat down and we managed to pick a book to go over, and we started, and we would just go around the Beit Midrash, the place of study, and we would just ask people to translate word after word after word, and we just made it work. This guy was adamant about sitting there and helping me. And even though he barely spoke any English and I barely spoke any Hebrew, we just tried to make it work. And it was actually a key point in me learning Hebrew was really all his help. Really, really helped me to start picking up the language.
Now that's very nice. That's very good point. That's good. That's great. You got what you need is one good friend.
Yeah, that's definitely true. One good friend goes a long way, and Israelis love reaching out. They love hearing about other people's experiences living in America. They're always super interested. Yeah. They're always happy to listen and help, and really people with big hearts. That's really how I would describe Israelis.
Yes. I'm gonna have one more question for you about the Army, and then I'll let you go. How do the soldiers support themselves while they're here, when they're in the Army? Is there a stipend? Do you get a monthly stipend?
Yeah. So different soldiers get different amounts, depending on their job, depending on the needs of, for example, a lone soldier or a not lone soldier. So essentially you have different tiers. You have what's called in the slang terminology, I guess, would be a jobnik, which is essentially, your desk worker, someone that maybe a secretary or, I don't know, logistics person. So they're going to get basically a bare minimum, not a lot. You're talking about maybe, I want to say 800 shekel a month, really just some sort of a stipend for most people that live at home. It's kind of pocket cash for the month.
Okay.
Then you're going to have what's called tomech lechima, which is kind of combat support. And they're going to get a little more. That would be something more along the lines of search and rescue. There's a search and rescue unit that I guess would fall under that category, or maybe someone in the paramedics. That's kind of a combat support unit, so they're going to get a little bit more money. I forget the exact numbers at this point.
Okay. I'm sure they change all the time. But so you do get a monthly stipend. You can buy food,
right?
And you have barely enough to rent an apartment. But you're not
So rent is actually a different thing. I was about to get to that. So lone soldiers get a specific stipend for rent. So they get an additional, any lone soldier, no matter what job you're in, what you do is you go to within the Army, there's a job called a moshakit tash, which is basically a social worker. For the Army, she deals with, figuring out who's a lone soldier and who needs what, etc. And you go to her with your paperwork, and you get a stipend, and lone soldiers will get a stipend of 1,300 shekel a month, specifically for rent. which depending on where you live is, either enough or almost enough, or,
Okay.
usually it's enough to make do.
Okay. All right. So
And
yeah,
then,
these
and
are.
then you'll get the monthly stipend on top of that.
Okay. So yeah, it's all right. Those are really the only questions I have. Because it seems like a lot of these American lone soldiers come here and they're like floating around, and I always thought, like, how are they supporting themselves? How do they get an apartment? I mean, how do they pay for food and stuff? Who's paying for this stuff? And okay, that I was wondering. That's all. And also, I mean, how do they fly here and then fly home? Now, some of them may have money, money saved up. It's fine.
Right. So in regards to flying home, a lone soldier, let's say a person does 2 years and 8 months, which is essentially 3 years of service. Usually a lone soldier is given about 30 days per year of service to fly home. So that means your first year you get 30 days, your second year you get 30 days. Now, generally, what happens is one time within your service, FIDF, I believe, is who's in charge of that through Nefesh B'Nefesh. They do some sort of a stipend or something, but they basically pay for one full round trip ticket for lone soldiers to go home and visit their families. So that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And outside of that, it's kind of, it unfortunately comes out of, it comes out of either your pocket, or if your parents are able to help you, then,
Or you don't go home. Or you don't go home.
Or
You stay here.
or
That's
you
all.
don't go home. Yeah.
All right. Look, you're here to serve, and
Right. I
but
believe also on a side note, I think that at one point, and I don't know what's going on now, but at one point El Al had some sort of a discount for parents of lone soldiers to fly, to come to Israel to visit. And I know that was a big thing, but obviously who knows what's going on now.
right. Do you know if there's been an increase in lone soldiers coming here during this pandemic, or a decrease? Do you know?
I actually do not know, which is interesting because I volunteer at different lone soldier organizations. So that's something that I would think that I would know. But honestly, I have not.
I'm sure there's been I mean, it just makes sense that there'd be a decrease because the borders were closed. I mean,
so I think
people
that the
couldn't fly
borders
in,
closed
or
in general, but I think that they have made allowances for people to come in, specifically that are drafting. So I'm not so sure that there's been a decrease.
Interesting. Okay. Do you know how many lone soldiers there are at any one time?
There's a couple thousand.
A couple thousand at one time? A couple thousand lone soldiers?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about a massive military, and lone soldiers also don't just encompass people from Chutz La'aretz. They're also, unfortunately, Israeli lone soldiers. People that are estranged from their families. There are some people that are estranged, whether maybe they come from the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi communities, where their parents, sometimes even disown them for drafting.
Interesting. That's sad. That's sad. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our final Aliyah guest today on Returning Home.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Sapinski, and we have with us today a very special guest. I was so excited to have this gentleman speak with us today, Abe Katsman, who is the Counsel to the Republicans Overseas Israel. Thank you, Abe. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you.
So great. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in with some questions. We have, an election in 4 days in the United States, and the whole world is watching, especially Americans in Israel, because the president, these past 4 years, President Trump has been so great for us, and he shows such love for Israel, and people are very nervous that if he does not win, things are going to go back to a bad way or change. Do you have any inside information? Okay, do you want to tell us? I'm gonna back up.
I hate to tell you, but if I had it, I'm not sure I would be sharing it with you here.
Okay.
So no,
not
really.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you do? What is Republicans Overseas Israel?
Well, we do a few things. In some ways, we kind of are the arm of the Republican Party operation here in Israel. On the most basic level, we help people vote. But more than that, we do what we can to get them to vote, to get them interested, to get them to contact people back in America, and to get them to vote Republican. And one of the most interesting things, we also, there's a lot of, there are media appearances, write columns in various newspapers. We try to get, we try to get some attention. We try to get publicity. And what really interests me about this is that, as opposed to, I'm sure if I compared notes with the head of Republicans Overseas, Belgium, or something like that, he wouldn't understand what I'm talking about when I say this. We've got like this megaphone. There's an amplified effect of what we say, specifically as Americans living in Israel, because in America, they're interested in what we have to say. For some people, it's almost an obsession, but they are, they really want to know we're them, and except that we're here with, sitting with front row seats to seeing American foreign policy and Middle East policy in action. Sometimes that's tough because we feel like we're, season ticket holders, forever condemned to sit on the 50-yard line watching stuff we just can't believe. But for the last 4 years, it's actually been surprisingly good. And from that standpoint, I again, there are obviously people who disagree with that, but I think the vast majority of people who are favorably inclined toward Israel and who believe that a strong Israel is part of a strong United States policy, and that's really the Republican position. I think they're very happy with the developments. Plus, I think that the people in Israel and Jews in America, whether they pay attention to it or not, there are other things to appreciate here also. The president just came out with some months ago. I know that there was this executive order to tweak the definitions of anti-Semitism under the Department of Education regulations and under Title VI, if I'm not mistaken, of the Civil Rights Act. Basically to protect the Jewish students on college campuses from the kinds of abuse that we've seen them subjected to over the years. But just last week I saw that the administration is actually going out and going to label Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and Oxfam as anti-Semitic organizations. It doesn't have a huge effect, but it will discourage people from, you're tarring them with something, and they've got to pay attention to it. It's not going to shut down their business or anything, but it's good. It's just great that they're being called out. There are organizations that could do a tremendous amount of good. Call them out when they don't do it.
Right. Okay. So you write articles and you get people garnered up here. And I find that very interesting when you mention the amplification effect. You're an American. I'm an American. What does that really mean? You say people in America care what we think. They care what American Israelis think?
Yes, it's they care about a few things. First, a lot of people care about Israel, and they care about Israel because it's a very good indicator of what the U.S. is doing in terms of foreign policy everywhere. I said when the president moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and I was asked about this, and I said, look, everyone here is happy because we think this is about Israel. But if you step back, this is really about America, because they see this. They see America standing shoulder to shoulder with their totally embattled enemy that it's so easy to step back from. And instead, they're sticking with them.
Who's they? Who's they?
No, when people see the United States, I'm saying that in Pyongyang and in Tehran and in Moscow and in Abu Dhabi, they are looking not so much at where the embassy is going to be located. They're looking at how America treats its allies and to what degree America can be trusted, to what degree America will will stick to their allies and won't just, look, there are unfortunately times when the U.S. comes in, does things, and then walks away before the locals who have thrown in their lot with the Americans have gotten everything they need, and it's unfortunate when that happens. Anyway, people
what you're saying is a partnership
from a foreign policy standpoint to see how the U.S. is treating its allies. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that they are interested. People, if they hear us, if they see us, they know you're us. An American looks and sees another American living abroad, and that American living abroad has more credibility because we're one of them. We can talk to them as one of them. We're not foreigners.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I know. No matter how accurate or how strong our radar is, we have more credibility than the Israeli off the street. Yeah, 100%. I know. That's interesting, and I didn't think about that. So many Americans come here, and I don't know how many. I think there are 180,000 of us here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of them, try to integrate. We had a guest just now, and his whole big thing is, I really tried to integrate. I went to this program, so there were lots of Israelis, and I tried to speak Hebrew, and I argued with him, and I said, look, there are Americans who come here when they're 60 years old or older. They're not going to learn a second language. They're not going to become Israeli, and you and your organization here actually keeps a candle, lit for these Americans who are still, they're American. And if you have things going on here, is that right? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I would say I don't think it's an either or. I think you can be perfectly Israeli and still flip your American hat on and go on to the radio and sound completely American. One of the reasons that Prime Minister Netanyahu is as popular as he is in America is because they see him as this unbelievably American guy. He speaks American English. He speaks it better than most Americans do, unaccented, but no one would ever say he's less than 100% Israeli. So
right. Okay. Tell me what you think is going to happen on Tuesday. If Trump wins, will there be a big party here? Do you have anything planned? A big bash? Is there going to be some other big move, like he moved the embassy to Jerusalem? Anything in the pipeline? Any surprises? Anything to get us excited about? You can tell me.
Well, there are a lot of ways to look at this. A lot may depend on what actually happens, and of course, some of the question is whether we're even going to know right away what the election results are. There is a distinct possibility that it's going to be close enough that it'll be tied up in the courts for where results in particular states are being contested, and depending on how those work out, well, we'll see what happens. My hunch is that the pro-Trump vote is undercounted, and as it often is in these types of situations where there is a proper way to think about things, where all right-thinking people agree on a certain position, then you're very likely, the pollsters are going to be very likely to undercount the people who are taking the supposedly less popular position. So, you saw this happened in Brexit. It happened when Netanyahu ran in 2015, and the polls were showing him either losing or Isaac Herzog winning. And you even saw it in America in 2016. I think Hillary Clinton was, as surprised as anybody by the final results. She was apparently, they were popping the champagne already early on election night before the returns came in, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. If anything, the hostility to Trump voters is worse today, hard as that is to believe, than it was in 2016. And if that's the case, whatever the polls say now, they are probably dramatically undercounting the Trump vote. I could be wrong. It could be a blowout, but you know what? It could also be a blowout the other way, and that that is going to surprise people.
Okay, we have 30 seconds to go. I want to thank you for coming. Can you tell me quickly, if Trump wins, when is his next visit going to be?
Well, look, last time around he made it a point to come here pretty quickly. His first call was to Netanyahu.
All right, so
I don't know. I'd like to see him soon.
I know. We're out of time. Thank you, Abe. Thank you for joining us. We will have you on again after the elections, and it was really great. Thank you so much.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.